I was asked, I'm going to talk on beauty and patronage and why they matter. The first half or so is about beauty, and maybe then the last part is about patronage. And the two go together, at least Aaron and I thought so when we got it together. So first, come with me for a few minutes to Rome, to the road at the top of the Pincian Hill, at sunset on a winter afternoon. Look out across the valley, down to the Tiber. Immediate below is what 2,000 years ago was the Campus Martius, the field of Mars, god of war. On this day, it is full of meandering streets, rose and ochre-colored buildings, church steeples and domes, tiny cars, and peaceful human beings running here and there, seeming ant-like in the distance. Look up to the west. A peachy golden glow hovers, I actually took this photo that day, hovers over the commanding presence of Michelangelo's dome on St. Peter's Basilica. At the horizon line, ripe peach deepens to a fiery rose. Higher above the glow, shades of pink-dusted plum blend into an ever-darkening blue. It is sunset in Rome, and it is an event. Men, women, and children from here and everywhere crowd the railings, taking selfies, asking others to take portraits. The ever-changing sunset brought us all here. This spectacle goes on 24 hours a day, every day on some spot on this earth. In each of those places, someone is looking up. Men, women, and children look to the horizon at sunset because we are all longing for what that moment of visual glory means. We're longing to live in that kind of all-encompassing beauty all the time. Every protester marching to end a particular injustice, every social worker striving to reconcile just one family, every journalist, at least old-fashioned journalist, trying to tell the truth about a war or a corrupt government official, every pastor working on a Sunday sermon to encourage a congregation, every parent trying to know what to say to a confused child, every teacher hoping to inspire their students to learn and make a better world, every one of us is trying to do the best we can every day to live an honest, meaningful life. We are all longing to see the world set right. We're longing for love that brings everlasting joy. In biblical tradition, Psalm 63 says, it is a longing for God. Oh God, you aren't my God. Early will I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh also longs for you in a barren and dry land where no water is. Thus have I looked upon you in the sanctuary, that I might behold your power and your glory. For your loving kindness is better than life itself. My lips shall praise thee. Here the psalmist describes his longing for God in bodily, earthy terms: thirst, flesh, a barren and dry land. What he thirsts for is a glimpse of the glory and power of God and the experience of resting in a love that will not pass away. But it is more concrete than that. The psalmist has looked upon God in the sanctuary, a place. We long for a place, a real place where love and justice, mercy and truth, beauty and joy are the taken for granted realities of the realm. What is that sanctuary? In biblical and Christian tradition, it is the cosmic New Jerusalem. The earthly city has often been a metaphor for that city, and contested as it has been through history, and as it is today, it remains a metaphor. The Bible begins with the creation of a perfect home, a place where longing is fulfilled. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Next comes a step-by-step account of how the cosmos came to be. Stars, planets, air, water, the earth, fish, birds, mammals, and then man and woman, Adam and Eve. At the end of each step of creation, God declares that it is good. Lutheran theologian Joel Olowski, sorry to bring up Luther, has pointed out that when Greek, well, he started out okay, he was an Augustinian, right? Anyway, Joel Olowski has pointed out that when Greek-speaking Jewish scholars translated the Hebrew Bible in Egypt in the 3rd century BCE, in what is known as the Septuagint, they used the Greek word kalos, beautiful, rather than agathos, good, for God's pronouncement. So from very early on, the cosmos was declared beautiful. But soon the text describes the breaking of that wholeness, that sense of living beauty. We know the story. God tells Adam and Eve, first man and first woman, that they may eat of every tree except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The serpent, Satan, arrives and points out to Eve that the tree is pleasing to the eye, good for food, and good to make one wise. He questions whether God really said they would die if they ate of it. The beauty of the fruit is part of the enticement. Eve eats, and so does Adam, and the idyll is shattered. And so, as the old Joni Mitchell song says, I credit my husband for this, I thought it was Neil Young. At any rate, as the old Joni Mitchell song says, ever since we have been longing to get back to the garden. The Bible is a story of the tragedy that brokenness brings, not only to human beings, but to the entire creation, and of God's action to restore what is broken. Throughout the Bible, beauty is both a reminder and a talisman of hope. Along the way, there are tangible representations, three-dimensional icons of the place of restoration. The first is the tabernacle God commanded Moses to create in Exodus as the Israelites wandered in the wilderness. The second is the temple Solomon built in Jerusalem. In each, there was a Holy of Holies, the most sacred place, the place where God met the high priest. When God came to each of those places, they were filled with an impenetrable, luminous cloud. Both are physical symbols of the psalmist's sanctuary, the place where beauty reigns. From there, the biblical narrative documents just how deep the brokenness can go. War, exile, slavery, degradation of the land itself, betrayal, rape, murder, child abuse, it's all there. From the depths of that bleakness, the Hebrew prophets proclaim a return of that perfect sanctuary in the words of Ezekiel, Isaiah, and Zechariah. Isaiah 11 is one example, and a famous one. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit, and the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion and the fatted calf together, and a little child shall lead them. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. The Christian New Testament describes God's direct intervention when God in Jesus Christ comes as a man to give his life to redeem the whole creation. He dies and rises from the dead, promising eternal life to all who trust in him. At his death, the veil separating the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple sanctuary is ripped in two. The earth quakes, bodies rise from the grave. The book of Revelation shows where we are headed, the reality of the ultimate Holy of Holies, where we live in beauty and joy forever. Those original holies of holies in the tabernacle and temple were cubes decorated in gold leaf and fabric woven in scarlet, purple, blue, and golden threads. One year when I was reading this, when I was, 20-something, early, I was still in college, I wrapped all my Christmas presents in brown paper sacks from the grocery store, and I cut out red, purple, and gold construction paper and decorated them because I was so inspired. Anyway, they're great colors. Solomon's temple was located in Jerusalem, the Zion of the psalmist. One reason that site is contested to this day. In Revelation, the New Jerusalem, the cosmic Jerusalem, is also a cube, where the Bible begins in a perfect garden where the desire to be gods to ourselves destroys its joy. It ends in a garden city, a cube, this one made of diamonds, rubies, amethysts, pearls, gold. It is beyond politics. It is, as the psalmist said, the perfection of beauty. John, in Revelation 21 and 22, describes that city. God is the light, the Lamb is the lamp. The city gates are never shut because there is no night. There is no sickness, no death, no war, no poverty, no broken hearts. But one old thing is still there, the tree of life we saw last in the garden. And at the center, as in most earthly cities, flows a river. This one, however, is full of the water of life. Its banks lined with those trees. The river, John writes, as bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb down the middle of the great street of the city. Also on either side of the river stood the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the trees are for the healing of the nations. In history, particularly in the West, where Christianity long took root, that longing has taken shape in myriad ways. In literature, music, art, architecture, politics, religion, sometimes for great good, and sometimes for destruction. While the imaginary of the New Jerusalem is biblical and Christian in its roots, its power to inspire has not only shaped the lives and actions of believers, but has also been a spur to the life and work of those who do not believe. It is often beauty like the sunset that awakens that longing in all our hearts. For example, in late 19th century Britain, longing took shape in the aesthetic movement, inspired by writer-critics such as Walter Pater, who argued that life, all of life, had to be lived out of an ideal of beauty, summed up by the phrase that many of you know, art for art's sake. The movement included one of Pater's most famous students, Oscar Wilde. In 1882, in an interview with the New York Evening Post, Wilde, his own life a litany of unfulfilled longing, described the feeling in secular terms. Man is hungry for beauty, therefore he must be filled. There's a void. Nature will fill it. The Genesis, I really would like to have met Oscar Wilde. Anyway, the Genesis narrative suggests that such longing is rooted in the separation that occurred when God cast the first parents out of the garden. Of course, they wanted back. So do we. It also suggests that the separation is particularly painful because we are created in the image of God, created for communion with God and with each other and the whole creation. But what is that image of God in us? How does its presence foster our longing? Theologians and scholars have been debating that mystery for thousands of years. In his classic De Trinitate, on the Trinity, 4th century North African theologian Augustine described the inchoate, inarticulate knowledge we have deep inside before we can put it in words. Jesus Christ, as the Word of God, Augustine argued, is that deep knowledge in the heart of God. And when he spoke the cosmos into being, that cosmos became a living statement of that knowledge. We, Augustine says, are created in that image as we turn our knowledge into words. We are the image of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as memory, that deep knowing, understanding, giving meaning to that knowledge, and will or love, the glue that brings the two together. Or perhaps the writer of the book of Ecclesiastes put it best. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity in man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning. Or as John Calvin would say, it's lost in the mystery of the mind of God. And that's the whole biblical story. Humankind lost its original home and has been longing for it ever since. We see it worked out in our own lives in the lives of those around us, and in the traumas of the world in which we live every day. Andy Warhol supposedly said that everyone looks for 15 minutes of fame. That's another way of saying we hope to be noticed in order to still the emptiness inside. We seek wealth, prestige, celebrity, a better house, the perfect outfit, the right invitations to the right parties, the right friends, the most views on YouTube, influencer status on Instagram, whatever. It's all about filling that void Oscar Wilde knew so very well. Greeks and Romans wrote of the lost golden age. Buddhists seek nirvana. Pure Land Buddhism imagines a paradise of soaring mountains, verdant valleys, lush trees and plants, sparkling waterfalls and flowing streams. Hindus dream of being eventually reunited with the universal spirit. Islam describes a beautiful garden with rivers and abundant fruit, and buildings made of golden bricks with floors of musk. As we've seen, the Hebrew prophets and Christian writers describe the New Jerusalem, a new heaven and a new earth, a restored cosmos that will be our eternal home. Each of these visions speaks to our longing to be back in the garden, once again on speaking terms with God, our Creator, face to face. And beauty is often the trigger. Clearly, a lot hinges on that word, beauty. To take us further, let me give you a definition and then a personal example. Dana Gioia, former Poet Laureate of California and former chairman of the U.S. National Endowment of the Arts, says that the experience of beauty can be divided into 4 stages. 1, arrested attention. We have to look, to linger over whatever we have seen or heard or read. A thrill of pleasure, number 2, an unusual thrill out of proportion to the object's immediate importance. It is bigger, deeper than we are. 3, a heightened perception of the depth or meaning of things. We understand something we did not understand before. We are more than we were before the encounter. Then it's over. The moment is gone. We can remember it, look back on it, but we cannot hold on to the ecstasy. In the summer of 2012, I had an unexpected opportunity to experience this process. My husband and I, and off and on some friends, both of us being Scandinavians, had long dreamed of driving all the way around the Baltic Sea from Copenhagen, Denmark, and back, a kind of roots trip. That summer, we got our chance. Of all the places we visited, Lithuania was perhaps the biggest surprise. It is a Catholic country, sandwiched between Orthodox Russia and Lutheran Latvia, Catholic Poland, and, for many centuries, Lutheran East Germany. On the way to Vilnius, the capital, out in a field far from any town, in the middle of nowhere, Lithuanian Catholics created a hill of crosses with origins stretching back several centuries. Under Russification, the Orthodox Russians would take the crosses down and the Lithuanians would put them back up. Then came World War I, and the Germans took them down and the Lithuanians put them back up. Then 20 years of independence suspended the process until World War II, when the Nazis came, followed by the Soviets, and the process continued. Finally, the Soviets just gave up. Well, I know a couple Lithuanians. The Lithuanians were too persistent. Since the Berlin Wall came down, the country has been independent and the crosses arise without being threatened. Pope John Paul II put one there, as did the Armenians in 2001 on the 1700th anniversary of their country becoming Christian. My husband and I didn't know what to expect. I thought it would be interesting, but it turned out to be much more than that. It's a long walk. I mean, they set it up. You have to walk this, well, I guess the picture was up there. It's a long walk to that, across this flat field to the hill. As you get close, you see, stretching out on either side, all kinds of crosses. Wood, metal, works of art, humble cobblings, shrines, stones, crosses hanging on crosses, you name it. You enter a narrow, ascending path. You are surrounded by crosses. Some were hung with beads or rosaries, others carved inscriptions in languages I couldn't read. Many had the dying Christ at their center. Still others shot wooden rays of sunshine from the crossing. The risen Christ beckoned others. Sometimes Christ himself, arms outstretched, was the cross. Tall, short, sophisticated, simple. Two sticks of wood nailed together. The crosses were everywhere I looked. Never had I seen such a concrete outpouring of devotion. As I started to walk up the hill, I felt tears streaming down my cheeks. I didn't even know I was weeping until I felt those hot tears. I was inside beauty before I was conscious of it. The beauty of this tangible witness to indomitable faith. There was nothing to do, but praise God, I wanted to sing and dance, and then minutes later, the intensity was gone. But all of this doesn't answer the question of what exactly beauty is. It tells us something about what beauty does, but what is it? In my reading, I have found all kinds of definitions, from Plato and Aristotle, Cicero, Ficino, and Alberti, to von Hildebrand, von Balthasar, Hegel, or Kant, right on to the late Dave Hickey, who basically says, we know it when we see it. A sunset, a butterfly in flight, a smile on a beloved face, all of these give us an experience of beauty. But that's to answer in a circle. Beauty is that which stops us short, causes us to reflect, convinces us that we fall short, and there is hope for the future. Something which does all those things is beautiful, a circle. Hickey, in fact, who was quite a character, never balked at using the word beauty, even though it had been quite out of style for much of the 20th century. In The Invisible Dragon, 4 essays on beauty, he wrote, "Beauty is not a thing. The beautiful is a thing. In images, beauty is the agency that causes visual pleasure in the beholder. And since pleasure is the true occasion for looking at anything, any theory of images that is not grounded in the pleasure of the beholder begs the question of art's efficacy and dooms itself to inconsequence." In C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, the master devil Screwtape tells his young protege Wormwood that only God, the enemy, can make pleasures. Satan, their father below, has tried and just can't do it. Pleasure is God's domain. The best devils can do is pervert pleasure. But beauty is more than that. Russian art historian Alexei Lidov has coined the term hierotopy, which good luck being able to say that fast, to describe the art form of creating sacred spaces such as the Hill of Crosses. What sacred spaces do, he says, is destroy the barrier between observer and observed. They put you, the observer, in the space. And in sacred spaces, beauty is what you find yourself in, much as I did that day in Lithuania. No longer an observer, a participant. Beyond that, beauty is both a cause of our longing and a source of our hope for some kind of resolution, be it an eternal heavenly home or simply a deeper understanding of our life on earth and a greater love for those with whom we share this life. Why a cause? Because when we see beautiful things, that sunset, a human face, a work of art or architecture, we know that we do not measure up. In Ezekiel 43, the prophet recounts a vision in which he saw the temple described above, the dwelling of God, in great detail. God gives him an order. I remember the first time I read this, I thought, what? Son of man, describe the temple to the people of Israel that they may be ashamed of their sins. God's beauty enables us to see ourselves in sharp contrast. Pope Benedict XVI put it this way: beauty pulls us up short, but in doing so, it reminds us of our final destiny. It sets us back on our path, fills us with new hope, gives us the courage to live to the full the unique gift of life. In The City of God, a book we'll hear more about later, Augustine suggests another cause of human longing. There he uses the term inclinatus ad se, meaning turned toward itself. In his lectures on Romans, Martin Luther, there he is again, uses the term incurvatus in se, meaning curved in on itself. Adam and Eve's choice in the garden led to human beings turning toward or curving in on themselves, focusing on themselves rather than what is beyond. Beauty, Augustine said, and I think Luther would have agreed, straightens us out, enables us to look outside ourselves, to have room for others, for God. Writing about beauty in the light of redemption through Jesus Christ, Roman Catholic philosopher Dietrich von Hildebrand suggests just how beauty straightens us out. He distinguishes between two kinds of beauty of form, the simple beauty of a pleasing painting or a human face. Beyond that, he argues, beauty of form does something more. Again and again, it is necessary to understand the mystery of this beauty of form. It is directly attached to the visible and audible things, but the reality about which it speaks is a spiritual world which towers high above everything corporeal. It contains a summons. In it there dwells a sursum corda. It awakens awe in us. It fills our hearts with a longing for the eternal beauty of God. Why hope? Because the very fact that something or someone beautiful exists, we can see him or her with our very own eyes, means that beauty and the good are possible. We know that death and destruction, injustice and squalor are not all there is. We know there are alternatives, and we want those alternatives. We want to find them, to create them, to nurture them, to live in them, and to enable others to live in them too. That very hope also gives us the courage to stop the direction we are going and change our lives. Consider this example from William Faulkner's 1939 short story, Barn Burning. 10-year-old Colonel Sartoris Snopes, I love the name, turns in Abner, his abusive arsonist father. They keep having to leave towns because his father burns things down. Because for the first time in his life, Colonel Sartoris has seen love and beauty. Where? In the home of Major Despain, the man his father is working for. The lane to his house is lined with oaks and cedars and other flowering trees. The fence massed with honeysuckle and Cherokee roses. The home itself is beautiful. The people in it treat each other with love and respect. Shocked at this vision, Colonel Sartoris longs for it so much, he is willing to break the cycle of abuse and turn his father in. Beauty gives him hope. As Colonel Sartoris stands beside his father, he thinks, it's as big as a courthouse. They are safe from him. People whose lives are a part of this peace and dignity are beyond his touch. But as we saw in the story of Eve in the garden, we can use beauty for our own ends. Turned in on ourselves and our immediate needs or pleasures, as Augustine said, we turn beauty from a talisman, pointing to God and joy, into a tool for our own purposes. Sometimes we are so blinded by what we want that we miss the better thing beauty points us toward and miss the joy it offers. Take this example from the New Testament. Jesus wasn't exactly the Messiah the Jews were expecting. His first miracle didn't fit their image at all. They were looking for a political savior, someone to lead them to military victory over the Romans and reestablish their nation. They hoped Jesus, this miracle worker who seemed to understand everyone, would be their man. Their focus was on their own immediate troubles, not on the needs of the whole world, the bigger, deeper picture. In his book, The Heart, von Hildebrand argues that Jesus made his true mission clear in that very first miracle, turning water into wine. Here were all the disciples in Cana, up north in Galilee, far from the sophistication of Jerusalem. There were suffering people all around, hunger, disease, poverty, Roman oppression. Then what does the Savior of the world do to start things off? He makes very good wine for a wedding party. In fact, he makes the best wine for the end of the party when everyone is drunk on the lesser wine provided by the host. What was he thinking? Von Hildebrand says this: utilitarian charity is cool, calculated, and marked by utilitarian dryness. At Cana, we find this divine extravagance, this unlimitedness of charity, which reaches to the smallest detail. It is this divine tenderness which excludes no gift from its intention, as long as it is a beneficial good to the person. At Cana, joy was the theme. Yes, joy was the theme, just as it was for everyone on the Pincian Hill walking the sunset. Christ, Christians believe, would go on to heal the sick, feed the hungry, make the lame to walk and the blind to see, and ultimately give his life so that human beings might be restored to live eternally. As von Hildebrand suggests, in his first miracle, Jesus was showing the deeper purpose of his miracles, so that human beings might enter into joy and beauty eternally. It is joy, not some superficial happiness, not some mindless pleasure, but the deep joy that comes through pain, through struggle, through suffering, that human beings long for, that beauty points us toward. Nor does the biblical narrative end with Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. No, there is something more, the something Jesus died to make possible. As we've seen from the Hebrew prophets through the book of Revelation, there's the promise of restoration. With beauty, we get joy. In fact, beauty gives joy. For Christians, art has long been one way to express longing through beauty. Pope Benedict XVI argued that Christians living this vision embody one of the strongest arguments for the truth of their faith. The only really effective apologia for Christianity comes down to two arguments, namely the saints the church has produced and the art which has grown in her womb. Christians must not be too easily satisfied. They must make their church into a place where beauty and hence truth is at home. Without this, the world will become the first circle of hell. I like that guy. There is some evidence supporting his argument. In the June 2017 London Telegraph, Olivia Rudgard reported the results of a survey that showed not only that 20% of young people in Britain between the ages of 11 and 18 described themselves as practicing Christians, but also that 13% had decided to become Christians after visiting a historic church or cathedral. The Church of England's national youth evangelism leader at that time, Jimmy Dale, said the results of the study shocked him and his team. But John Inge, Bishop of Worcester, and then Anglican bishop for churches and church buildings, told the Telegraph, "This shows the power of church buildings. They give the sense that the Christian faith has inspired people to build these extraordinary buildings." Of course, there are muddled human proclivities involved in the creation of these spaces, the desire for recognition, for preferment, for being thought better or richer or wiser or more with it than others, or the need to keep an emperor happy. But there is more. In the greatest works, and I'm thinking of Giotto's Scrovegni Chapel, Borromini's San Carlino, San Marco in Venice, San Vitale or St. Apollinaire in Classe and Ravenna, theology was intertwined with all those human peccadillos. Giotto, who was himself an outsider artist at the time, worked with the Eremiti monks on the program for the chapel frescoes. A wealthy outsider whose fortune was made from lending money took a risk engaging him. But there was something deeper. The Christian church had learned something from Augustine's City of God, namely that we have dual citizenship in the polities where we live on earth and in the New Jerusalem. Further, the life of the New Jerusalem, embodied in the Ten Commandments and the visions of Isaiah, Ezekiel, and the book of Revelation, was to be the template for how Christians live their citizenship on earth. At its and their best, the church and Christians did just that for 1,000 years. Remnants of that vision inspire many Christians to this day. They did it two ways. They created beauty at the highest level in art and architecture, poetry and fiction, music and even dance, and they served the suffering, the sick, the homeless, the stranger, and the poor, a dual witness to the kingdom to come. Of course, today we have to ask why. They filled church buildings with gold and color, precious and costly mosaics, and even jewels, because the church itself was a three-dimensional icon of the New Jerusalem. When the faithful entered, they were on embassy ground of their ultimate home. Everyone was welcome. The rich and the poor, the beauty and the glory were for everyone. We have lost that understanding and that vision, and it is here, finally, that patronage matters. As I've looked across the globe at the great works created by Christians, Burgos Cathedral, San Marco, or Torcello in Venice, the churches of Ravenna, countless churches in Rome, Osius Lucas in Greece, and the cathedrals of Magdeburg or Naumburg in Germany, I've realized three things had to come together for these wonders to exist. They are, first, some one person or small group of persons who had profound vision. Second, a source of wealth to support the vision. And third, artists of the highest skill and caliber to execute and expand the vision. In Burgos, Spain, it was a 12th century bishop named Maurice who had the vision. It was the wool economy that provided the wealth, and the community of skilled craftsmen who traveled Europe in that century, and later the Siloé family of sculptors and those they attracted to join them, who provided the artistic skill and imagination to fulfill the vision and create one of the most beautiful spaces on this planet. And in each of these cases, and there are many, many more, the works created spoke not to comfort believers, but to inspire and challenge them and to speak as three-dimensional icons to the world. I repeat, the buildings and the art bore witness to the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ for the world. I would add something else. In each of these cases, the buildings and the art spoke in, of, and to their times. They were the finest contemporary art and architecture of their times, which is why, in their quality and profundity, they speak today. They're real. Copying them is the easy way out, and I've heard far too many serious Christians argue that we need to copy the 12th century or the Baroque. To me, that borders on blasphemy, because it means we don't have the vision or the discipline to honor God out of our own age and time. We are lazy and afraid. We want comfort, not witness. There are few contemporary examples of great work in art and architecture in churches or Christian chapels. The best work I know of has been done by two Danish artists, a couple in Denmark, and in a few places in the United States. Vilo Church in Ishøj outside Copenhagen and the Calvary Chapel at Biola University in California are two examples. The visual vocabulary is contemporary, but the work is timeless and tethered to ancient tradition. It was the sack of Rome in 410, one of the most shocking events of the ancient world, that prompted Augustine to write The City of God, the book we spoke of earlier. First, to say that the sack wasn't the fault of the Christians, which took about, 400 pages, and then to show the true citizenship of the true city of God to the church and the world. In the 400 years that followed, according to archaeologist and historian Brian Ward Perkins, the only buildings of any size and quality that were built were churches, icons of another city. Christians understood that their buildings and their art spoke, and their temples were different from the Roman ones. Roman temples were largely the gifts of one donor to show his wealth and power. People were not allowed inside. They were not gathering places. Christian churches, on the other hand, were built for people to experience their true citizenship. At first, only baptized Christians were allowed inside. Later, the catechumens were allowed inside until the Eucharist, and then they were asked to leave. The alley between the baptistry, which was then usually a separate building, and the church was often called the Paradiso, because when you left it, you were entering the New Jerusalem. Jump ahead, we're almost done, you guys. Jump ahead to art and architecture. You all probably know well. The legacy of the wealthy Florentine Barberini family and the Barberini Pope, Urban VIII, who held that post from 1623 to 1644, which gave him enough time to get a few things done. They used their wealth to complete St. Peter's. and restore a host of other Roman churches, supporting artists and architects like John Lorenzo Bernini and Pietro da Cortona, and inspiring private collectors as well. Of course, as the century wore on, the taste of those collectors went to the sweeter works of Baroque art giants, Guido Reni, and the Carracci, and Nibali and his cousins, the brothers Ludovico and Agostino, rather than the realism and dark tones of Caravaggio, who found followers only in the Netherlands. Taste matters, but churches across Rome are home to the best of the work of these artists, and what isn't in the churches is now in the Barberini Museum and others. Music and literature are not my fields of knowledge, but this much I do know. It was the church that inspired some of the greatest music ever composed, from Bach and Mozart to Haydn and Mendelssohn. In that field, someone like Sir James Macmillan continues the proud tradition in contemporary classical form. Dana Gioia has labored long to revive the great Catholic literary tradition and extend it to all Christian writers. But in the visual arts, I can't point to any great work other than that of my Danish friends, where art and architecture work together to create a sacred space. Nor can I point to Christian philanthropists, other than one or two, who fund work out of the deep Christian message in music or visual art for the world. We have sponsored 3 shows at the National Gallery in London, one at the Hirshhorn here in DC, and we are sponsoring the visual commentary on Scripture and online commentary at King's College, University of London, that strives to show the way works of art interpret the Bible. We also sponsored the composition of a new oratorio, Fiat Lux, by James Macmillan, with libretto by Dana Gioia, and have helped with literary projects Dana has helped to launch. For 5 years, I chaired the board of the Museum of Biblical Art in New York City, a project of a visionary president of the American Bible Society, who left just before I got there. In 2014, the board of the society lost its vision, in my opinion, stopped funding for the one respected Christian art institution in the heart of elite society, the New York art world, and moved itself to Philadelphia. What have I learned from all this? First, it's back to the 3 sources I mentioned. When you have the person or persons with the vision, perhaps the patron in this case, the financial resources, and the men and women with the skill to work for excellence at the highest level for the world, then and only then does the work make a difference. It has been far easier for me to work with so-called secular institutions where you are working with excellence all around than it has ever been to work with Christian institutions. Perhaps our most successful collaborations have been with the National Gallery of London. Each of the 3 shows we sponsored were huge draws. 2 won the Apollo Magazine Award for Best Show of the Year, Caravaggio, The Final Years, and Sacred Made Real. And hundreds of thousands of people saw those shows. We also sponsor a fellow at the gallery who teaches in the Masters in Christianity and Arts at King's College, University of London, and who does research on works from the Christian heritage mostly at the gallery. Our first fellow is now the keeper of Western art at the Ashmolean in Oxford, and I think you'll hear from our second fellow later today. The Christian projects I know of, sadly, are often too culturally ignorant and end up being discounted or ignored by the world. I say this to our shame. If you are putting something with the Christian message into the world, it can only be done at the highest level of excellence, or it will be laughed out of town. And when secular people see true excellence, they support it more often than not. Examples are James Macmillan's Fiat Lux, premiered by the Pacific Symphony in Orange County, California, and then performed at the Barbican in London, and his Stabat Mater, premiered at the Sistine Chapel and then at Lincoln Center in New York in 2019. In New York, James was asked before a largely non-Christian crowd, what about the role of his public faith? He spoke very clearly. They listened. Why? They knew his work. Evangelicals meet in warehouses. The old mainline churches have given up the historic Christian faith, and the Catholic churches seem to have lost their vision for the arts that attain the quality to speak in our time. So what are we to do? I suggest the following, and then I am done. First, serious Christians need to become knowledgeable about both their own visual history and the visual language of the time in which we live. That means study and looking, lots of looking. Second, serious Christians need to think about their visual witness to the world. Europe is still filled with buildings and artworks that non-Christians flock to see because they are some of the best buildings and works of art ever created. Where and how are we supporting those in our time who could create and execute such work? Rather than thinking of comforting the faithful, Christians need to think about our visual witness to the world. Third, serious Christians need to foster college and graduate art programs that take the history of art seriously, not as something to write endless tomes about, but as something to inform their ability to see and not only translate the gospel into contemporary visual language, but to create works of art on other themes at the highest level. Fourth, and I cannot say this strongly enough, Christians need to settle for nothing less than excellence in the visual arts, which includes architecture. Christians need to understand that only excellence is a worthy gift to God and a visual witness to the world, and our work needs not to be for the comfort of the faithful, but for God and for the world. You know, somebody asked Antoni Gaudi why he put the flowers, all those ceramic flowers on the top of these towers that he built on the facade that he finished. I mean, nobody can see it, right? And Gaudi said, I didn't do it for you. I love that man. Make him a saint, you guys. Okay, now and for ages to come until Jesus Christ returns, we are in this for the long haul. The men and women who built the Romanesque and Gothic cathedrals built for eternity. Christians need to look to them for our example. We need to quit being lazy and afraid and get with the program they understood. And we need to know it can be done. Thank you.